Welcome to the Libertarian Institute YouTube and Odyssey channel. Today I'm joined by my colleague, Sheldon Richman. We're going to go over three stories that we have come across over the past couple weeks and take them from the libertarian point of view. Sheldon, first one is a Thomas Sowell speech. What was this about?
Well, I have all videos this week. I hope people don't mind that. Although this one I will direct you also to the text. In 1990, so we're on the way back here. But this shows Sowell's foresight. In 1990, he was given some big award by AEI, the American Enterprise Institute. In fact, it was their big annual dinner. Gerald Ford was there, former president, and he gave a speech which I recommend that everybody either watch and listen to or read, called Cultural Diversity and International Perspective. And what he wants to do in this is distinguish what he calls the fact and general importance of real cultural diversity from the current ideology, the narrow, sense of diversity that we're still using today. But he's talking in 1990. Let's remember that. So it's brilliant. So I'll read some quotations from it just to give you a sense of it. He's so good. He's written books where he's traveled the world several times to show how stuff that goes on in America it's not as if there's been no experience before, and policies that we complain about here have failed everywhere else. So anyway, he says, over the centuries of human history, the entire history of the human race, the rise of man from the caves, has been marked by transfers of cultural advances from one group to another and one civilization to another. Cultures exist to serve the vital practical requirements of human life, to pass on the hard-earned knowledge and experience of generations past and centuries past to the young and inexperienced in order to spare the next generation the costly and dangerous process of learning everything all over again from scratch through trial and error, including fatal errors. Cultures exist so that people can know how to get food and put a roof over their head, how to cure the sick, how to cope with the death of loved ones, how to get along with the living. Cultures are not bumper stickers. They are living, changing ways of doing all the things that we have that have to be done in life. And he points out that things that we consider integral to, say, Western culture, American culture, like paper and printing, originated in China hundreds of years before it got to Western Europe. Many other examples. And so, and what the bottom line of all this is that in some respects, some cultures, I stress in some respects, because cultures are not monolithic, they have many different aspects, are superior to other cultures. As he points out in the speech, Roman numerals are not just different from what we call Arabic numerals, they're really Indian numerals. They're not just different, they're better. You can't do things with Roman numerals. He said the only thing Roman numerals are good for are numbering kings and Super Bowls. Other than that, try doing anything significant with Roman numerals. Any culture might have some feature that's superior to other cultures in that respect. And that's very different from the way multiculturalism and its relativism are talked about today.
My first one is my favorite quote from Michael Malice. I love his ability to destroy myths in one sentence on Twitter. He said, if the government didn't have a monopoly on security, only the rich would be able to have security. Just like when the government got out of other businesses, the only cars produced were limousines, the only clothes produced were tuxedos, and the only food produced was foie gras. I think that is just so quick and clever to illustrate one of the great myths that if you don't support the state coercively involving itself or monopolizing something, you really just want the people that have the money to control the society at large. In reality, capitalism channels, free markets channel this energy into producing products for the masses overall. And even when some things are very expensive at first, computers, cell phones, printers, televisions, home phones, ceiling fans, air conditioning units, there is an incentive to get these to the masses at large. Next item we have, Uncanceled History with Douglas Murray, The Enlightenment. What did we learn from this?
Well, I like the series so far. I haven't watched them all. He's got a good series on YouTube. I don't know where else. But there was one in particular he did with a historian by the name of Henry Clark, who's had who's had interaction with the Liberty Fund, which of course is a good classical liberal / libertarian organization that I have had association with over the years. And I want to point out one thing that came up during that. I mean, it's a whole discussion of the Enlightenment and why it was generally a good thing. And he points out, Clark points out that according to a couple of public opinion polls, a smaller margin of Americans favored, and these were the words in the poll, capitalism over socialism, smaller margin, then favored the free market over a government-managed economy. So 53% said they favored capitalism over socialism, but 77% said they favored a free market over a government-managed economy. So Clark then says, quote, which means that 24% or so, at a minimum actually, of our fellow citizens believe that there's a difference between a free market economy and capitalism. And then he goes on. And so Adam Smith would have been somewhat more comfortable with the designation a free market economy than he would with the term capitalism, precisely because presumably one of the reasons why our fellow citizens are so hostile to capitalism by comparison with a free market economy is because they are thinking of corporations that have a cozy, cronyistic relationship with government, which is exactly the target of Smith's entire economic system, namely mercantilism, quote, close quote. That's exactly true. The word capitalism is such a Rorschach for people that they can read anything into it that they want, that I find it not a very good word. I know libertarians like to use it, Mises used it, Ayn Rand used it, but I've been complaining about it along with friends of mine for quite a while. And in fact, there's a book called Markets Not Capitalism that I have some chapters in, which was edited a few years ago. It's still available by Gary Chartier, who's a member of our board, and Charles Johnson. And it's certainly worth looking at. The word capitalism doesn't seem to communicate, which is why people have to say sometimes free market capitalism, state capitalism, crony capitalism. If capitalism can be modified by anything, good or bad, I mean, really, what use is it? So I thought it was worth thinking about. Adam Smith never used the word. It's sometimes claimed that it's originated with Marx, but actually good hardcore free market guys like Thomas Hodgkin used the word capitalist negatively to mean owners of capital who were tied in with the state and were hurting all other working people, which he included in that category entrepreneurs, not just working people in the sense of working with their hands, but people who organize enterprise are also workers in this original radical liberal position. So I'll stop there.
My next one is from a great book, Why It's Okay to Want to Be Rich by Jason Brennan. He talks about the concept of regulation first in theory, and then he says that advocating regulation is actually a fool's errand. On page 100, he says, to favor increasing regulation, you have to think the unorganized mass of consumers, taxpayers, and the common public will generally be more effective in lobbying for their interests than organized, highly motivated special interest groups who keep offices in Washington, D.C. You have to think that the people who enjoy concentrated benefits and can spread their costs onto others will be less effective than the masses who suffer from diffuse costs. Now, this is important because he also gets into the imperialist theory of wealth, the claim that imperialism is what makes nations wealthy. A up-to-date analogy on this could be something like, well, America benefits from the military-industrial complex. Proof of this you can see in Raytheon stock, Boeing stock, Northrop Grumman. Look at how much those stocks have grown. Halliburton, these companies get so rich, therefore America benefits. What this leaves out is the fact that a nation, America, is made up of different people, all with different interests. So what happens is some people benefit at the expense of others. A lot of soldiers die. A lot of soldiers get their limbs blown off. There's a lot of anti-war activists in America who do not advocate such things as imperialism, while the Council on Foreign Relations explicitly does. That is a great lesson that I thought Jason Brennan did such a good job. He is actually a philosophy teacher, but when it comes to economics, he's extremely well rounded. And I think that book is absolutely terrific, along with his book, When All Else Fails. That was published by Princeton. And so it's nice that we have a big publisher on our side sometimes, where he makes the case that libertarianism or a rational philosophy would simply not have double standards for people who are in the military or in a police uniform. You would want some sort of security force to be designated to stopping the murderers, the kidnappers, and the rapists. Absolutely. But anyone has the right to do that. He says, what we need to do is stop embracing a double standard when it comes to politicians, the police, and the military. Great books. I love Jason Brennan. What is the final thing you have for us? Is this a John Stossel video?
Yeah, this is a really good John Stossel video, very recent, as was the Clark video. And this was on recycling. And then over the years, he's done stuff on recycling that we've found there's been a lot of good material coming out of libertarians on at Reason Magazine, for example. So Stossel in this one has a really good one. It's only like 7 minutes, but it just packs so much into it. And it features a very good science writer, former New York Times science writer, John Tierney. I think he's at the Manhattan Institute. He's very good. And it just shows that recycling is sort of myths all the way down. So Stossel begins by pointing out that Greenpeace now concedes that most plastic, there's a quote, most plastic cannot be recycled. Cannot, not won't be, but cannot be recycled. Much of what, and then he goes on to have people in the field say much of what people recycle goes into landfills anyway. I mean, people undergo all this effort, right, to separate stuff. Sometimes the rules are unbelievable, and they even have to like cut up cardboard at a certain size in some places. Crazy rules that consume, scarce time where people could be playing with their kids or eating to their kids or whatever. And then putting it in separate bins, sometimes color-coded, and they can't figure out which is which. It gets picked up by like trucks all over the place, which of course are using up gasoline if people care too much about that, or putting carbon dioxide in the air if they care about that. All these trucks are doing it, but of course it's in a good cause, recycling. I'm being sarcastic. And then it ends up in landfills, or it gets shipped to the underdeveloped world where it doesn't even get into a landfill. It just gets into huge mounds, many, many feet in the air, because what the hell? They're Malaysians. They don't care. In other words, the third world becomes our dumping ground. It's ridiculous. Only something like 5% of stuff is recycled. It's just unbelievable. Even when you get a plastic patent, they have a recycling person saying, this person who runs a plant or one of these centers, if you get this packaging, you often get it with Amazon and everybody else. I'm not blaming Amazon, but you'll get this plastic packaging which will have that triangle on it. That recycling triangle has arrows. She says, and she holds up an example. It says, this is not recyclable. But of course, the company wants to look good. The manufacturer wants to look good. And Amazon wants to look good. So they put this stuff in, but it's not even recyclable. It'll end up in a landfill. Now, are we worried about landfills? Are we running out of space? No, we're not running out of space. As Tierney says, quote, if you think of the United States as a football field, all the garbage that we will generate in the next 1,000 years would fit inside a tiny fraction of the 1-inch line. Think about that the next time you recycle.
My final one today is a book titled Race and Economics: How Much Can Be Blamed on Discrimination. Many economic lessons in here. One of my favorites is chapter 60. Well, there's actually two. The other one I have to mention on taxi cabs. I'll get to that in a second. He says, the most immediate effect of licensing is to restrict the number of practitioners because of the higher entry costs involved in meeting the qualifications of the activity. Some licenses, as in the case of cosmetics, barbers, require many months of schooling. Others require the installation of costly health and safety equipment. Still, others demand the purchase of a license or certificate of authorization from an incumbent practitioner that can cost millions of as was the case when interstate trucking was highly regulated. Further, some jurisdictions issue only a fixed number of licenses or authorizations. All of these requirements raise the cost of entry, which naturally leads to a smaller number of practitioners. Restricting that number is only the initial effect of licensing. A secondary effect is that the price of the good or service offered is higher than it would otherwise be. So this is one of the many instances where it's not just that, well, I love the Koch brothers so much and I love Jeff Bezos, so I'm going to come out against licensing. Anyone who really cares about the working class must advocate decriminalizing all peaceful economic activity between consenting adults. So as far as empowering the working class, the first thing you can do, voting is so important because it's a reflection of our desires and who we want to lead. Well, a better reflection of our desires is what jobs we want to have and exchange with people on a voluntary basis. I can't remember which page the taxi cab but Monopoly is on, but he basically says in order to drive a cab, you have to have one of these medallions. And the cost of a medallion, a few $1,000s when they started issuing them in 1933. Most recently, this was published in 2008. The cost of a medallion for you to drive a taxi and make voluntary exchanges was $781,000. If you care about the poor, if you care about the downtrodden and the everyday man, or you care about the nation and the well-being of a prosperous society that allows for families to be built and thrive, you must abolish occupational licensing. My body, my choice in all realms, including the economic one. Thanks to everyone for watching the Libertarian Institute YouTube and Odyssey channel. Sheldon, thanks so much for your time.
Pleasure.